Cyclists have been having a lot of bad ideas during this quarantine. People have been Everesting, trenching, riding 100 miles around their garden, whatever. So when I saw that the same course, Mont Ventoux, was going to be both on RGT and on Zwift, this was the first one that's on both platforms. And, I'd done the crit comparison video to kind of compare the physics. So I thought it made sense for the first course with any overlap on both platforms, kind of compare the courses, compare the world itself more so than the mechanics or the racing. So what that meant in practical terms is that I'm basically going to ride up Ventoux twice in a day, back to back. Unlike the crit video, since this isn't a race, I didn't give myself any sort of refractory period. I don't think I even got off the bike between my two attempts. I wanted to get as apples to apples as I could, so on both platforms I'm on 100% trainer difficulty, or feedback intensity as it's known on RGT. Obviously a lot of what I'm comparing here is feel, so I wanted to keep that as consistent as I could between these two attempts. I want to find out what it feels like to go up Ventoux on Zwift, what it feels like to go up Ventoux on RGT. So this is same trainer, same bike, same day, same shoes, same everything. All right, I'm ditching the split screen so we can really see what's going on here. Bottom of the climb, we start at this little French town. Swapping over to RGT, bottom of the climb, we're at a little French town. All right. Kind of up on the climb proper on Zwift here. Got some water, some cliffs, some grass, beautiful view. Over here on RGT, we're coming up the climb, and we got some trees and some grass. Still kind of a beautiful view, similar idea. Here's the first look at the meteorological station at the top on Zwift. Here it is on RGT. It's all looking pretty different. Okay, I'm going to stop beating around the bush here. These are actually two different ways up. Two of the three sort of common cycling routes up Ventoux. So when people talk about Ventoux, they're not actually talking about this specific road. They're talking about this mountain. Here's a map of all three routes. The important thing here is that this one is on Zwift and this one is on RGT. You can see they kind of come up a similar face, but just different ways, and they approach the top from different angles. So those two towns at the bottom, those were different towns. They do partially look different because of the different graphics, but they're also rendering completely different places. The Zwift climb starts from Bedouin, France. This one is the traditional Tour de France climb. When most people think about Ventoux, this is what they're talking about. The Bedouin climb is a little bit more, let's say, populated. It has a few more little chateaus. You can see a little bit more of the infrastructure that goes up to the ski resort that's on this mountain. It's still fairly isolated, but it has a lot more on it than the other side, which comes up from Malus, France. And that one is on RGT. Here is a breakdown of the gradient of the climb from Malus that's on RGT. Of the two, this one's a little bit more inconsistent of a gradient. Although when you compare the two, the stats are pretty similar. You got the steepest gradient in the middle. They both climb about 1,600 meters on the nose. They both average out to about 8% over the course of the whole thing. I think for a lot of people, the Malus side trips them up because they're not used to having to change gears a lot and change cadences, or they don't want to. For me, that's not really a problem. I like to have some variation in my rhythm. I think it gives my legs a rest or my lungs a rest, depending on whether I'm kind of spinning or mashing. But I know for a lot of people, especially people who are really good at pacing themselves, they don't want to have to get out of the saddle like I'm doing right here. They want to be able to just grind out their cadence, grind out their pace, and nail that target wattage. I'm a little bit less concerned with that than most people, but I'll say there's no easy way up either of these. They're both going to be hard, and they're both going to take you a long time. Having said that, I want to talk a little about the practical side of doing an effort like this. This is about 4 hours. I was trying to keep my power right around like 200 to 220 watts the whole time. You'll see I was probably a little over on the Zwift climb, maybe a tiny bit under on the RGT climb. And that's because I did the Zwift climb first and the RGT climb second. So I was kind of starting to like mentally come apart a little bit maybe on the RGT climb. In this clip, my power is under because I'm looking around trying to find my food. To do an effort like this, you're definitely going to have to eat a lot. And I'm eating a big piece of mango right here. I really like fruit as on the bike food, especially if I'm doing the kind of effort where you can chew and swallow solid food. Basically, my rule of thumb is if I'm under my threshold, I'm trying to eat something. Fruit, probably something like a banana or a mango in this case, just because it's easier. I couldn't really do a mango out in a race. It'd be hard to package, hard to take care of. But even in the early stages of like a road race or a fondo, I'll do a banana on the bike. Before the race, I might do some berries or something. I know a lot of people are into all kinds of different diets now, but I run on carbs. I run well on carbs. My stomach, even under pretty high intense workloads, can deal with carbs even in the form of fruit. Doesn't necessarily have to be a gel. Although if I'm going over my threshold significantly, I normally switch to gels because it is a little bit easier to get down, keep down, and also easier just from a practical sense. I just wanted to highlight that because from an experience side, doing 2 back-to-back Ventoux attempts, whether you're doing it in real life, both on Zwift, both on RGT, whatever, really any ride that's 4 hours and most of it's climbing, you're going to have to really think about your fueling strategy and get it right. And for me, that means eating a lot of carbs, something I can stomach, and doing it often. Getting a little water here to go with that mango. Since I'm not racing here, I'm not doing a group ride here, and even if I was, there's pretty much almost no drafting effect up both of these climbs. They're pretty steep, the speeds are slow, so there shouldn't be too much group dynamic, pack dynamic on either of them. Really got to get into the main difference now, which is how it looks. I'll say they feel pretty similar. The gradients across both platforms to me felt the same. I've seen people saying that the gradients feel a little harsher on RGT, not on Ventoux specifically, but just in general. I had it on 100% on both, and 10% felt like 10%, 5% felt like 5%. I think people put maybe a little bit too much stock into the whole quote-unquote trainer difficulty thing. I've said it before, but to some degree, watts are watts, and whether you're spinning your legs fast or spinning your legs slow, you're going to get up at the same speed for the same number of watts. And how you get there is as much of a product of which gears you're choosing as it is how much resistance the trainer is giving you. Really, the difference between high resistance and low resistance is how fast your flywheel is moving. So whether you're fighting the weight of the flywheel or whether you're fighting a magnet, but it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other to me. I'll say the feel on both is really good. So what we're left with is how it looks. And you're going to be looking at the screen for a long time going up both of these. I've let some of the scenery play out as I've been talking, and you've probably noticed like the devil balloon and the spectators and all the different, castles and water features and cars parked along the side, animals on the route, the paint on the ground. This is what Zwift, this is really Zwift flexing their muscles. Zwift has a lot more engineers than RGT does, and because of that, they can pay them to just do more programming, do more stuff, do more visual asset creation. So I gotta say, the new Zwift, the France World in general, I was a little bit skeptical about how it was going to look because there wasn't much lead time between the beginning, even the beginning of COVID, much less the beginning of when they knew they were doing the Tour de France, and now. But I think how good it looks is a testament to the fact that they really put a full effort into it. They really put their full weight behind making this world look good. And the whole thing looks great. I rode the L'Etape stage this weekend. It looked amazing. And I think they knew they had to get Ventoux right because so many cyclists see it and know it and revere it. And I think a good example is right here. This is Chalet Reynard. This is where the Tour de France, virtual Tour de France stage finishes. I think just in the interest of time. But it's an iconic part of this climb, and they knew they had to render it correctly because people were going to know, people were going to care. I think RGT chose this side from Malusan that doesn't have quite as much stuff to render on it. And I'll say a lot of people really like the look of RGT. I've heard many times people say, oh, RGT looks better. I like how it looks more. And I think that's sort of just a flavor comparison thing. But I'll say it shows that RGT is really trying to be more of a simulator, and Zwift is trying to be a little bit more of a game. Where Zwift focuses on things like power-ups, you can see I got a feather power-up right here. There are no power-ups over on RGT, but what there is an adjustable heads-up display. You can see I just took all of the UX off of my main screen. I do still have it all on my second app. RGT also requires you to run 2 apps. It requires you to have a much more serious system. So each of these elements you can add and subtract at will on RGT. So you could ride with a totally data-free main screen and just have all of this data, the rider list, the speed, the power, the cadence, the heart rate, all of that on your, what they call the mobile app. The companion app would be the Zwift equivalent. So it's kind of like riding with a head unit. Another thing RGT does is make you slow down for turns. So you can see right there, my wattage turned red. That's making you slow down for a sharp turn. And maybe that doesn't factor in so much going up a climb, but certainly going down a big climb, it makes a huge difference. And these are the kind of changes in functionality that people ask for all the time on Zwift. But Zwift is sort of more concerned with giving us, this fun, colorful scenery, giving us like the XP, giving us the bonuses and the badges. And that is one difference, I'll say. And this is sort of where Zwift shines, is when you're riding by yourself and you're just trying to accomplish a thing. Zwift gives you a lot of reasons to do that. There's a lot of great stuff to look at. And I know that at the top of this climb, there's a badge waiting for me. There's some XP that'll potentially unlock some new gear. Having said that, I think there's really a place for both of these platforms. I think that RGT is definitely, it's more of a simulator. It's more racing based, and it's more for someone who wants to simulate outside on a trainer. Zwift is for somebody who needs a little bit of extra encouragement to do that, to sit on a trainer for this long, and they need some kind of XP. They need some kind of goals to shoot for. They need some kind of gamification. The best comparison I think I can make is that Zwift is sort of like the McDonald's of this world. It's easily accessible. It's immediately satisfying in some way. It's sugary, it's bright colors, it's McDonald's. And I mean, the same way that McDonald's has a ton of locations, this is really easy to get on. You can run it on a phone. You don't need 2 devices. It's accessible. Whereas RGT is a little bit more like a steakhouse. There's not one on every corner the way there is McDonald's, but it definitely has a place when you want that specific thing. And I use that comparison because one does not negate the other. The existence of one does not necessarily mean that the other doesn't work. You just need to know what experience you're after and what is important to you. We can't talk about Ventoux without talking about the top, the lunar landscape. And when I was doing this RGT one, the graveliness of this texture sort of threw me off, but then looking at pictures, it kind of does look like this, the sort of like desolate lunar landscape at the very top, especially coming from this direction. I'll flip over to Zwift in a second and show you how they rendered this sort of barren top part, the bald mountain as they call it. One more thing I gotta mention before I swap over to the final Zwift shots here is that RGT is free. There's always a free version, or there always has been up to this point, but right now during COVID, they've made all of their features free. Even if you were only a free member before COVID, you could still ride up Ventoux, you could still race up Ventoux. It's pretty incredible, so I feel like I gotta include that. Here's how Zwift has rendered the sort of bald lunar landscape at the top. They did a really nice job with the mist, and the wind is one thing that this section of Ventoux is really known for, which There's no wind on either of these platforms. The only one I'm aware of that actually has wind simulation is CV Arcade. So somebody tell me, I don't know, does Ruby or Be Cool or one of those other ones have some sort of wind simulation? Now, I think wind might be possible to generate on RGT, but on Zwift, because of the way their positioning works, I don't think we're ever going to see wind. Again, that's a difference between the like simulator versus gamification sort of side of the equation. Zwift is a little bit more for fun. That said, this is a fun ride. I'm also pleasantly surprised, not surprised, but both platforms did a good job with that Tom Simpson memorial. I was a little bit more worried about what Zwift might do with it just because they do tend to go a little cutesy with things. But they did a good job. I think they faithfully replicated the things that needed to be faithfully replicated, and where they took liberties are places that are fine to take liberties. RGT, a little bit more straightforward. So last thing I got to say is, again, both of these platforms, I like them a lot. You got to know what you're getting into. Two Ascents of Mont Ventoux back-to-back. Really hard. If I had done this 2 more times, that would have been about the height of an Everest. So I don't know, maybe Everest on RGT, maybe I should give that a shot. I don't know, what crazy stuff should I try out? Anybody got any more questions about RGT? Maybe I will make a how to get on RGT video. It seems like I get those questions a lot, so maybe I'll do like a beginner's guide to RGT before too long. I do love the platform, love racing on it, love riding on it. So I'd like to see more of you guys on there too.